All right, just a little live update here. Haven't been on live in a while, haven't been on YouTube in a while or social media in a while. And quite frankly, it's done me such good in my heart. And it's done my body well to be just kind of quiet within myself, but very active physically and quiet in the mind. But I do miss you guys, and I wanted to give you an update. I've been incredibly busy with a whole month full of channelings called the Galactic Rebels. And what we're talking about is learning the shadow side and the light side of the galactics. For instance, with Pleiadians, everyone thinks they're cute little light fluffy love bunnies. When you think about galactics and extraterrestrials, you think about beings that are very heart-centered, that are here to help you, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you think certain of the galactic beings, such as the Alpha Draconi and the Draconi in general, are there to experiment or hurt you, and that's not always the case. There are some rebels that actually are ethical, and sentience isn't always the best thing, and non-sentience isn't always the worst thing. Learning from the heart, not always the best thing. Learning from the mind, not always the worst thing. So I've learned a lot from these particular forces, particularly the Beta Draconi, who we channeled just last week. I believe it was Saturday that we channeled the Beta Draconi. And they were incredible and ethical and wonderful. And I never really thought I would see that, because we have our certain ideas or concepts of what learning from the heart and learning from the mind actually mean. So that has been an incredible experience to learn from them, highly enriching. All that's over on my Patreon channel. So for the most part, what I've been doing is facing fears. It's just kind of the month for that. Even astrologically speaking, centering ourselves into our own unique personal challenges with fear. And my job has always been, one of my favorite mottos is, you're going to feel anyway. You're going to feel fear regardless. And really the only way out is through. Yes, we can do breath techniques to calm us down. Yes, we can do meditative practices. Yes, we can center and ground ourselves. And there are so many techniques that I teach here and on my Patreon channel for those things. But what I really learned this month after falling and getting a concussion and being down and out for a week, exploring a new sport and then falling flat on my head and getting the huge hematoma and nausea and dizziness that accompanies it. And I learned that my fear thoughts did not go as far as I thought they would, in terms of just exploring it, in terms of just using spiritual inquiry to ask yourself, is that really true? Because when you're facing a deep fear, particularly a fear that could affect your family, affect your body, affect your mind, affect your career, and then you begin to explore it with spiritual inquiry and ask yourself questions of, is that thought true? Is that fear really true? You will find more times than not that you're just allowing that fear-based center of the primitive mind to rule everything, to control and be the guide of your ship. And that doesn't need to be the case. When I fell on the ice just a couple of weeks ago, I was like, well, what if my nausea is going to last for a while? What if I'm not able to remember things, or, and any time I would forget something, that fear would be exemplified. But I've always been forgetful, and falling didn't really make any difference. So I had to ask myself, is that really going to be true? Am I going to decide to let the fear be the captain of this ship right now and dictate my creative life and what is manifested? Or am I going to do something else? Just that idea of saying, you know what, I don't know. And it may be good that I don't know. This is an actual technique. When I channel beings like Jesus or any angels or Christ conscious beings, they always say, surrender. And I would always say in return, surrender to what? What does that mean? Can you give me a definition? That's just how my brain works, very analytical. And they often say, surrender to the unknown. Face your fear of uncertainty. You don't always have to know. So that has been their definition of surrender, is just to say, I admit that I know nothing. I choose to step into the unknown. I choose to breathe in the uncertainty and to become comfortable with the unknown. Now, it took me probably, I think it's been 2 weeks since the concussion to be able to really, I was back on ice in 5 days. After all my symptoms started subsiding, but the fear was still there, and I would simply do things like trying to cross one foot over the other, just do a forward crossover, and I'm like, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen. What if it happens again? Okay. What if it does? You have a helmet on this time. I mean, there are some proactive things to work through fear, but it didn't really get me past it. I fell backwards. So now when I skate backwards, that fear tends to come up during the action of what formerly caused the pain. That can be the case with a lot of people, that you have a fear that comes up during the action state, during whatever you're acting out, that would remind your body and the muscle memory to be triggered into that pain. So I noticed that whenever I was skating backwards, my head would get some sympathy pains, like where I fell, where that hematoma was on the back of my skull. I could feel like some twinging as if it remembered the fall. It was very weird. And I hear people talk all the time about muscle memory, and of course, it's true to the extent, that would make sense. When people lose limbs in traumatic scenarios, and then you hear stories like it feels like it's still there and it twitches. Well, my head was twitching while I was skating backwards, and my coach said to me yesterday, she said, I don't know why you're so scared of skating backwards. It's really, you're skating well, you're doing it well. It doesn't look like you're unstable. You do have your center of gravity. I don't know why it must be just mental for you. And she said, don't you have things that you do that you teach others to get through fear? And I said, yeah. But in that moment, you even forget all the tools, all the tricks, all the modalities, and the muscle memory tends to just take over. So that's what was happening for me. So in that moment, I know it sounds freaky, but well, not freaky, but perhaps it sounds trivial to you that I would say just breathe. But the straw breath technique, slow exhale and pranayama, is a really big deal during that moment. Breathing through the nose and counting your breath, aligning your breath with your body movements have been one of the best things I can do if you struggle with physical fear is walk. And every time you walk forward, align your legs with inhale and exhale. Another of my coaches tells me that all the time. She's like, when you're afraid to skate backwards on the circle, because that's my biggest fear, is skating backwards on the circle, not just regular backwards, but on the circle. So she said, breathe, inhale when you move your left foot backward, and when you move your right foot backward, exhale, and slow down so that your breath pace is slower. But you can do that when walking. You can do that when moving your hands in Kriya positions, when you're having a difficult conversation. You can face fear by tapping, and it's not always on a place where, say, if the conversation is professional and you're worried someone's going to, think that you're a big weirdo if you start tapping on your heart center or tapping on your temples or tapping on your head or all the places where most people tell you to tap. Here's another point where most people tell you to tap. If that's not going to work for you, you can tap on your knee, or you can tap on your leg. You can find a place on your body that they don't even see and tap on that area and begin to control your breath and meter and measure your breath in alignment with your tapping. Right? So sometimes I will tap like 4 to 5 times, like 4 on the inhale, 4 on the exhale. Tap inward 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, inhale, and exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can slow that down. or speed that up. If you happen to be in a panic attack and you are moving very quickly, you can speed that up, right? So these are just little breath techniques that you can do during difficult conversations. You can do when you're on a walk. You can also counteract panic by moving your body with your breath, or if you can't, tap and meter and measure your tapping in a way that joins and aligns with your breath. And that is super helpful for just kind of moving through fear, because it's one of the things that I tell my coach. I'm like, look, I know that the fear is just still going to be there, and I know I need to breathe through it, and I'm just going to do it anyway. So I breathe through it, and then during the breath, you just face what you're afraid of. Move through. Out is through. The only way out is through when it comes to fears. So move through the breath, meter and measure your breath, use tapping if necessary. Oops, sorry about that. Align your breath with your body, and then move through the fear anyway, whatever the action is, whether it be physical or emotional. When you follow some of these active prana techniques, that's what I call this, active prana techniques, metering and measuring your breath, tapping during your breath, or moving your body in a way that aligns with your breath, and then face that fear anyway. Have that difficult conversation. Go ahead and do that difficult move, in sports. Go ahead and, do what you need to do anyway. I find that most of my fear is very physical in orientation, but a lot of people's fear is more mental, right? So whatever it is for you, I'm hoping that some of those techniques are going to work. I will be back on YouTube as I can. What I'm learning to do is to really prioritize my life right now, prioritize my body, prioritize my family. There's been a lot going on over here, just pretty much for everyone, and the consciousness of this unique ascension wave has caused everyone to learn boundaries, learn priority. So you see me a lot more on Patreon than you do on YouTube, simply because of that, just to be able to honor myself in that unique way. And I suggest that you do the same, is to go where you're wanted. And for me, it's my mind and my physical body, my health first. People say family first, but for me, what's working is health first. My mental and physical fitness and my health first. Kind of equal. I can't say before my family, but I'm trying to put it equally to my family so that, they're aware that I need that daily, that I need physical movement daily. And I breathe a lot and do a lot of my practice. A lot of my breath practice is very physical, and it's during this sport or physical activity that I'm actually focusing on a lot of my prana activities the most, right? So you can take all of your spiritual practice and make it a walking meditation, a moving, breathing act and art of Dharma. You can do that for yourself. I know that we live in a modern world, and when I first started teaching, it was 2.5 hours meditation minimum a day just to be able to calm the mind, and now it's okay. The mind is still a big part of what makes me afraid, but it only shows up in the physical now. It only shows up when I am attempting a physical feat. So anything else can be breathed through at first, but when you literally have physical fear of physically being harmed, that's a completely different story. And in that case, breath also needs to take over. And I've been noticing, particularly in modern spiritual communities, that breath is put on the back burner a lot. And people say, oh, mindfulness and breath are just things that we're all doing anyway. Except that you're not. We're not all doing it anyway. We're not counting our breaths and metering and measuring our breaths and doing correct prana in a walking meditation. If we were to be super honest with ourselves, most of the time fear takes over and we fight, flight, or freeze. Or we go into some reactive response. So it's helpful just to remind ourselves, because metered, measured breath is so important, no matter if your fear is mental or physical. And with this unique ascension wave that's going through this month, just be mindful of that and make your spiritual practice a walking, living, breathing work of art. Thank you so much. I will see you later today, here in an hour or so, actually, on Patreon. And then I'm thinking I'm probably going to start back on YouTube probably this weekend. But we still have a lot of family stuff going on. We just moved, and there's a good bit. So I will see you when I see you. Bye-bye.